Do you know what makes a book life-changing? Two things. It has to be kind of good. But two, I believe it's when you pick it up in the precise time that you need the information in that book. That is when a book has the transformative power to change your life. And today, because I am 24 years old, I am going to talk about the 24 non-fiction books that have most transformed my life. Every single one of these books has a lesson or toolkit which has changed the way I think every single day of my life since I've read it. Some of them I read years ago, and yet the concepts stay with me like they're common sense. These books span everything from spiritual enlightenment to self-help, politics, biology, and I would literally be a different person today if I had not read them. So I really hope they are just as transformative for you as they have been for me. And very quickly, if you're wondering why you should bother to read a whole book when you can just listen to my summary, get ChatGPT to summarize a book for you, it is such a different experience to sit and mull with a text. From a science of learning perspective, things will go so much deeper into your long-term memory if you really sit with an entire book exploring a topic. So for every book today, I am going to tell you a key takeaway that really transformed me. But if it piques your curiosity, please go buy it, read the whole thing, and let it change your life. Also, some of mine might be controversial, get ready. Okay, first we have A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle, and I read it on my Kindle. I picked up this book in one of the worst periods of mental health in my life. It was one of the most anxious times of my life, and let me tell you, it absolutely changed my self-perception. It's a spirituality book written by the famous author who also wrote The Power of Now, and it's the kind of book that I would only pick up if you feel called to it, if you feel ready for some deep introspection and the possibility of spirituality. My biggest takeaway was Eckhart's exploration of the idea of ego. He discusses how such a big source of anxiety is losing sense of our true selves and instead identifying with our ego, with the roles that we play day to day. So thinking of myself as Jade the YouTuber, or Jade with a certain type of house, or Jade who drives a certain type of car, and forgetting our true nature, which in Eckhart's description is consciousness. It exists only in the present. It's when you close your eyes and you go deep within, and whatever you witness there, that is your true self, and we're all the same at that core. This book will inspire you to meditate, it will shift your self-perception, and it's very life-changing. Highly recommend. Number 2, Atomic Habits by James Clear. This is the Bible of building habits and discipline. If you have big dreams, you want to get good grades, or you just want to be a better functioning human, this is the book you need to understand how to build habits. Since reading this book, I did an entire degree in cognitive science, and I had a whole module on behavioral change. But I remember when I first read it, I was introduced to the idea of the habit loop. And if you're unfamiliar with this, you need to go read that book. The habit loop describes how all habits, good and bad, are formed. So there's a cue. For example, the cue could be the smell of food, and this triggers a craving, a desire to have a need satisfied. In this instance, it could be hunger. And this triggers you to want a reward. You want your hunger satisfied. And based on your craving of this reward, you go ahead and do the action, which is getting a snack, eating some food. But the beauty is you can train your brain to adopt new habits by using choice architecture. So for example, leaving your gym clothes out the night before so that when you wake up, the habit of going to the gym is so much easier to perform because you've got the cue ready of the gym clothes. You want the reward, the satisfaction of the endorphins in your body when you exercise. And so you get up and you go perform the routine of going to the gym. Go read it, it's great. Number 3, The 4-Hour Workweek. This was probably the first ever business self-help book I read when I was about 14, 15, and it utterly transformed the way that I view my career. If you are working a corporate job or a 9-to-5 and you lack representation of other versions of what your life could look like, you need this book. It changed how I view productivity, options of self-employment, and efficiency in work. It was the first book that taught me we should measure productivity in output rather than just time spent. Why should I study for 10 hours in the library when I can study more efficiently and do it in 2 hours? How can I get the same result with less time? And it introduces the idea of delegation, passive income, and a concept which has stuck with me forever is this concept of a mini retirement. Tim Ferris explores the idea of rather than waiting for retirement to live your best life, go travel the world, have fun. We should try and form a career where we can have mini retirements, where we can take, a month off, 2 months off a time every 2 years, say, and go travel the world and make our dreams happen now. So much of my career has been inspired by this. Number 4, A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Frankl was a psychiatrist who survived the horrors of the Holocaust in World War II, and his book explores human resilience and what it means to have purpose. The main message that stuck to me is how essential it is for all of us to find meaning in our lives. The people who were most likely to survive the Holocaust were those who had a deep sense of purpose, whether it came from, relationships, living for people, a future goal, or a sense of duty. But there's also a quote which has stuck with me forever, which is, To draw an analogy, a man's suffering is similar to the behavior of a gas. If a certain quantity of gas is pumped into an empty chamber, it will fill the chamber completely and evenly no matter how big the chamber. Thus, suffering completely fills the human soul and conscious mind, no matter whether the suffering is great or little. Therefore, the size of human suffering is absolutely relative, and this just absolutely transformed my entire perception of human suffering. You know, if we're struggling with our mental health, we might think, oh, how can I be suffering? There are people who have objectively much more difficult situations than me. But suffering is subjective and relative, and it's okay to be suffering. What we should all be doing is focusing on finding a sense of meaning to navigate whatever suffering we personally are going through. Number 5, one of my favorite books of all time is Humankind, A Hopeful History by Rutger Bregman. I think he's Dutch slave. This book was given to me by my ex's mum and was such a gift because it fights for one of my core beliefs, which is I believe that all humans are inherently good. I believe that we're all a product of our experiences and how we're raised, but that inherently we all have the potential to be good. And Rutger explores this with rigorous scientific evidence, data, historical analysis, psychological studies, anthropology, and really argues that humans at their core are good. He reframes a lot of common ideas, like the idea of survival of the fittest. In actuality, so much of what made humans survive back in those days was survival of the friendliest. The better you were at empathy and cooperation, the more likely you were to survive. Rather than being naturally competitive, humans are naturally cooperative and communal. One of the examples which has always stuck with me is the idea of the banality of evil. He looks at people in Nazi Germany who committed atrocities like the Holocaust, and that we have an assumption that these people must be monsters, they must be evil, and yet when interviewed, they were often just very average, normal German people who had been convinced by an ideology, by a system to commit these atrocities. And so it makes you reflect a lot on how the way that systems are designed really impacts our perception of humans being good or bad, and how we need to pour our energy into making sure systems highlight and support the qualities of humans that we want to believe in. Number 6, Thinking Fast and Slow. I read this as mandatory reading for my university, and I'm so glad I did. It was the foundation of changing my entire perception about human behavior and decision making. It's written by a Nobel Prize winning psychologist and economist, and the main premise of the book is that we actually have 2 main ways we make decisions. There's 2 main systems of thinking in the brain. There's type 1 thinking, which is fast thinking, it's intuitive, it's quick. And there's type 2 thinking, which is slow thinking. It's really mulling over ideas, it's questioning things, it's deliberate, analytical, logical. And we think that most of our decisions are being made in type 2. We think we're really, deeply mulling over the decisions we make every day, when in reality, the majority of our decisions are defined by our subconscious brain, this type 1 thinking, which leads us to make many poor decisions in life, which leads us to many cognitive biases, which are exploited in marketing, which are exploited by governments in nudging us to make certain decisions. Things like loss aversion lead us to make poor economic decisions. It's just a great book. Go read it. Okay, number 7, Utopia for Realists, also by Rutger Bregman. If you care about the world being a better place, if you care about having a positive impact, but you don't necessarily know how that can happen, this is such, I have it here. This is such a wonderful and practical guide to looking at policy solutions that are proven with evidence to improve many people's lives at scale. We're talking ideas like the 15-hour work week, UBI, universal basic income, which is the idea of, a government giving every single citizen, regardless of employment status, £1,000 a month, or a set income every month merely for existing in your society, and how that can eliminate poverty and provide financial security for people to do the careers they really want to do, and also invest more time and energy in loved ones, in happiness, etc. So genius book. Number 8, The Artist's Way. If you've been following me this year, you would know that this book randomly showed up on my doorstep in about May. I have no idea who sent it to me, I have no idea how I received it, but did it change my life? Yes, it did. So am I believing that the universe just gifted it to me in the right time? Yes, I am. This is a bloody famous book. This has helped so many people. It is a 12-week recovery program to regain one's creativity. It helps you reconnect with your inner artist. I had 3 main big takeaways. The first is this idea of morning pages, where every single day upon waking up, you brain dump, you journal your thoughts for 3 pages non-stop, train of thought. And it is so good for clearing one's mind and becoming more aware of thought patterns that are affecting you day to day. Second, the concept of an artist date. Every single week, you go somewhere or do something that is purely to inspire you. You go watch a sunset. You just let the world inspire you. You observe, and you use that to fuel your creativity. And thirdly, exploring your own inner critic. Realizing that most of the voices in your head when you create are not your own. They're like your dad's voice, your teacher's voice. Realizing who's hindering you and then removing those voices. Highly, highly recommend. Okay, we're getting controversial. What's learning without a bit of controversy? Okay, this is Sex at Dawn, the prehistoric origins of modern sexuality. It explores a lot of data and evidence from anthropology and prehistory to argue primarily against the idea that humans are monogamous. As someone who is always questioning the world around me and why it is the way that it is, it's just fascinating to question, should humans be monogamous? Why is the nuclear family a thing? Is that built in? Is that a biological thing? Where did that come from? How does religion affect it? How did the advent of modern agriculture affect it? It also really digs into female sexuality, the demonization of women's promiscuity. Very, very interesting. And I also recommend reading the rebuttal to this book, Sex at Dusk, which basically argues that some of the evidence in this isn't perfect. Every book has critiques. There's the critique book if you want to read it. Number 10, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Dr. Joe Dispenza. If you've ever been interested in the concept of the law of attraction or manifestation, but you want to look more into the neuroscience behind it, this is the book for you. It looks at neuroscience, psychology, and quantum physics to argue for how our thoughts, the thoughts that we have day to day, really do impact our experience of our reality. How our personalities are just a combination of our memories, our thoughts, the stories we tell about ourselves, and that they are malleable. We can change them consciously. I read it when I was about 16 and it really inspired me to start meditation. Number 11 is Factfulness. We live in a world where we are constantly bombarded with information, misinformation, and just so much that, we need to learn how to critical think. We need to learn what is true, what is not true. We're in our little echo chambers. We're developing all these beliefs about the world. But what is true? What is true and what's not? This book uses data and evidence to challenge the idea that the world is getting worse, and instead to argue that the world is actually getting better. We tend to focus on bad news, bad events are always sensationalized, and it talks a lot about psychology, the gap instinct, and the reasons why we like to believe that the world is always getting worse. I found this surprisingly optimistic and just a useful toolkit to question the data that I receive. Number 12, Breath, the New Science of a Lost Art. Guys, this is the book that will make you never breathe through your mouth again. I read this and now I only want to breathe through my nose. I had no idea how harmful it is to breathe through your mouth. Bloody hell, just go read it. Just go look at his evidence, go look at the experiments he did. It's insane. Breathing through your mouth is so bad for you. We have a nose for a reason. Use it. Number 13, I'm going to be cheeky and do 2 books. The Creative Act and Big Magic, and I would recommend these to anyone who is interested in the creative process. These books gave me the language to discuss creativity differently. For example, in Big Magic, this idea of when we are undertaking a new project, it's like we're about to drive a car, and all these insecurities and fears are gonna pop up, and we want to kick them out the car. We don't want insecurities to be coming along on our journey and ruining the project. But true creativity requires us to embrace our fears, to let them get in the back seat of the car, but to not let them drive the car. You are driving the car, but your fears can come with you. You can do the things scared. You can feel the fear and do it anyway. Highly recommend. Number 13, Why We're Polarised by Ezra Klein. If you are stressed about the results of the US election and you have no idea how the world can be so politically divided, then go read this book. That's all I'm going to say. Number 14, All About Love by Bell Hooks. If you want to be a better friend, a better family member, a better lover, and a better person to yourself, then you need this book. This book is full of critical essays about love, about how love is a radical act. And the takeaway that most changed my life is viewing love as a verb rather than a noun, seeing love as something we do, something we practice in our actions, rather than something passive that just exists within us. So rather than being like, oh, I love my mum, of course I have the feeling in here of loving my mum, you have to see it instead as, I love my mum, so I'm going to show her that all the time in my words, in my actions, and the things that I do. Number 15, Braiding Sweetgrass. Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teaching of Plants by Robin Wall Kimmerer. If you don't feel connected to nature, read this book. It transformed how I view the natural world and my connection to it. It teaches you such deep respect and humility for the natural world. I learned so much about plants and our interconnectedness with life and this beautiful, feminine, almost maternal energy of the natural world. It's also a wonderful book to dip in and out of. Every chapter just gives you something. Number 16, Deep Work by Cal Newport. If you want to be a productive queen, this is your Bible. It gave me language that I use every single day in my working life like it's common sense. And then I forget that people haven't read this book and actually have no idea what I mean. It is that transformative. It's so simple, but so radical. Cal Newport defines this idea of two types of work. There's deep work, which requires all your attention. It requires no distraction. And there's shallow work, like replying to emails, flicking through different websites. That doesn't require all your energy. You can be distracted, it's fine. You can listen to music and it's fine. But nowadays it's so hard to have the dedication, time and space to do that deep work. How can we protect it? How can we do it better? How can we write the essay without distraction? How can we do really deep, difficult thinking? It taught me to create better routines, and it taught me not to flip between tasks all the time, to really silence my devices, my social media, my messages, and to get into a deep work state. Number 17 is White Fragility. And I don't have the book, so I read it on my Kindle, but I do have Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. And if you are white, go read it. In lockdown, I had a deep dive into books about race and anti-racism, and it fundamentally changed the way that I walk through this world and how I understand the systems that we're in and how I benefit from them. I don't know about you, but as a white person, I grew up terrified to talk about race. I grew up in a predominantly white area. I always thought that calling someone black was an insult rather than a descriptive, neutral term. And that book gave me the language and empowerment to talk about race in really necessary ways. And it's founded on the idea that because of white people's guilt and fear of being wrong, we don't want to talk about race, and that's so unproductive for the state of social issues in the world. So to benefit all the people of colour in the world, go read it. Number 18, Period Power. If you are someone who menstruates, skip the GCSE biology and just go read this book. I can't tell you how much I needed this and how much this has utterly transformed my life. I cannot believe there was a time in my life where I did not understand the 4 phases of my menstrual cycle and just how much it affects me, my mood, my libido, my work ethic, my mental health, my emotional state. Every single part of your menstrual cycle affects you radically, and you must understand it to understand yourself. The really cool thing is that it compares every stage of a menstrual cycle to the 4 seasons. So for example, when you're bleeding on your period, that's your winter and you need to hibernate, and it's important for that rest to take place so that you can then bloom again in spring and summer. Great book, love her. Number 19, Anam, Cara, Spiritual Wisdom from the Celtic World. I read this book by John O'Donoghue this year and it just transformed my life. It's probably one of my favourite books of all time. It's casual magic in a book. It talks about the importance of solitude, the importance of being present, embracing the wonderful mystery of life. If you're dabbling in spirituality and introspection, please go read this book. It's so good. John O'Donoghue is also a poet. His words are gorgeous. Number 20, Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. If you have ever proudly stated that you've only had 5 hours of sleep that night and you're fine, or, oh yeah, I'm happy to stay up scrolling, I don't need the extra sleep. Girl, read this book and you will realize that sleep is the bedrock of your capacity to form long-term memories, to learn, to have good emotional regulation, good immune system, health, everything. Sleep is everything. It'll teach you the different types of sleep, REM sleep, deep sleep, light sleep, why we need all of them. And it will scare you out of skipping your sleep, which is a good thing. Go read it, it'll change your life. Number 21, Ikigai. So guys, if you are struggling to find your purpose in life, your passion, your career, go read this book. Look at this Venn diagram. Isn't that so genius? You want to find your career in the center of all of these questions. I just did a whole podcast episode deep dive on my podcast, Finding Your Casual Magic, if you're interested in how to explore your purpose deeper. Number 22, On Palestine by Noam Chomsky and Ilan Pappé. We've all seen the horrors unfolding in the world, and the media can massively skew our perception of why those things are happening. And this book was just such a wonderful deep dive into the history of Zionism, how Israel was created, the role of the US and Western powers in supporting Israel, and how difficult it is to achieve peace and the nuance of it. It was really eye-opening to the way that I view that conflict, of course, but also more broadly to understand how nuanced and complicated most international relations things are. I'm not a historian, I'm not super politically educated, and yet that book was just super accessible, amazing deep dive. Highly recommend reading it if you're interested in what is happening in Palestine. Oh my god, we're nearly there. Okay, 23, Teachers versus Tech. This is a bit more niche, but as someone who's really interested in education, future of education, and EdTech and the role of technology in that change, this book was super life-changing for me. It's really skinny, it's a skinny little book, and yet it's so dense in terms of research into the science of learning, and basically argues that technology is not something we should just be putting in schools. There's so much nuance you have to consider, and as someone who wants to change the education system for the better. Like, good reading, highly recommend. And finally, one for our love lives, attached. You have probably heard the idea of attachment styles floated through the internet, as you should. Guys, it's so life-changing. I cannot think back to a time before I didn't know about attachment styles, because it revolutionized the way that I saw myself in my romantic life. It will explain to you why certain people are fuckboys, or why certain people are really anxious and clingy. It'll explain your behaviors in relation to the people you're falling in love with, and it will help you be a healthier, more securely attached human to love people in the way that you want to. I hope this was enlightening. I hope you found at least one book that piqued your interest or curiosity. I have read hundreds of nonfiction books, and a lot of them just haven't really done that much for me. Like, yes, it's been a little bit of learning, but I wouldn't say it's radically transformed the way that I view the world, especially a lot of self-help books. But for whatever reason, these books, they just did something to my brain. If you made it to this point in the video, please comment 2 things. 1, if you were interested to read any of these books, comment for accountability. Tell us which book you're going to read and why. I'm a victim of watching a million YouTube videos about books and then never actually going and picking up any. So please use the comment section as your accountability. Type which book you're going to go read and why, what piqued your interest. And then secondly, sell to me the nonfiction book that I need to read. What do I need to read and why? And if you guys want a version of this video for fiction, let me know, because I love reading. Books are the bedrock of my productivity, my open-mindedness, my empathy, and so much of my learning about myself and the world. So I always love getting people to read more. I love you guys. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you for being in this corner of the internet as always.